Today I'll be talking about, or refuting the claim that is Planned Parenthood's existence is an essential health service to young women. The secondary claims were that Planned Parenthood provides medical assistance to both men and women, it provides education and family planning, and it provides sexuality education to young adults and women. So, my refutation will be that the existence of Planned Parenthood organization is not as essential as it is made out to be. My response to the first claim, that is, Planned Parenthood provides medical assistance to both men and women, and that the proof was that yearly exams are unaffordable to many people, and that the amount of uninsured people is about 50 million within the U.S. But only 3% of those who couldn't afford screenings were provided such from Planned Parenthood, which means that's a very small amount of people, about 1.5 million, which is less than 0.5% within the entire U.S. Nearly 50% for those who are 34 years old or under, actually, according to the U.S. Preventative Service Task Force, which is part of the Department of Health and Human Services, states that women who are 21 to 29 years old only need pap smears for cervical cancer every 3 years, not 1 year also. So being unaffordable is not really an excuse. And that if you're under the age of 21, you don't need testing at all. And that healthy women ages 30 to 65 actually only need pap smears every 5 years. And that these testings are more accurate in that they create less false positives, which would lead to unnecessary and risky biopsies. The second claim was that Planned Parenthood provides education and family planning, which isn't really a claim, but in fact just a statement and more informative than an argument at all. But the grounds for this was that Planned Parenthood increases knowledge about contraceptive use, and that they actually give contraceptives to youth, and that this created a decline in teen pregnancies within the last 2 years. But there's no actual proof as to Planned Parenthood being the leading factor in this overall decline compared to any other public clinics such as public health departments, hospitals, and community health centers. Their third claim was that Planned Parenthood provides sexuality education to young adults and women, which again was not really an argument at all, but just a fact, and really there are no inferential leaps about that. But the grounds were that the sexuality education to young adults and women was Planned Parenthood. Next up. Planned Parenthood was essentially the #1 network for the education of sexuality to young adults, when in fact there are other organizations that work just as well, if not better, such as the Guttmacher Institute, which is ranked #1 in Philanthropedia's ranked nonprofits in productive health, rights, and justice because of their statistical analysis and research done for the youth education. And there's also the Advocates for Youth, which is ranked #7 on the list, and was one of the first organizations at all to speak up for adolescent sexual health. And that is why I believe that Planned Parenthood is not as essential as made out to be.
Right, organizationally, everything's easy to follow. You're basically going to go with a strategy where you're trying to diminish the importance of the argument, which I think is reasonable. You label the first point. You've got a piece of information that talks about how much of the services are provided by Planned Parenthood, 3%. That's pretty good. I didn't really get a source on that. It could have been from the same task force that you quoted on the very next point, talking about the pap smears, but you probably want to provide that particular source. The other thing that you might want to to point out, for instance, is that if only 3% was provided by Planned Parenthood, that means that 97% was provided by somebody else, and there's no information that suggests that in the absence of Planned Parenthood that those other groups couldn't be taking up the experience. So I think you need to also put it in the context of the larger argument. What are the criticisms of Planned Parenthood? A lot of the criticisms have to do with the fact that although they do these things that are being described here, the biggest portion of their activities is the more controversial portion, and that's the thing that people object to. And if we defunded Planned Parenthood, for instance, the impact would be relatively minor. I think that's primarily what the argument is on this issue. I think you're right in pointing out that there's just a lot of informative information on some of these points describing what Planned Parenthood does, but not necessarily showing that it is essential that others don't provide this kind of information, or in the absence of this information or assistance, there would be some particular harm. And I think on the third point, for instance, when you mentioned that alternative groups provide that kind of service or that sort of information, that's pretty reasonable as well. The notion about providing assistance in sex education or training or access to contraceptives, I think you could be a little bit more aggressive in arguing that there are alternative ways that especially teenagers can get access to this sort of information. And once again, I think an exploration of how Planned Parenthood fits into the totality of this information would be desirable. You've got a little bit of that. I think you need to have a little bit clearer explanation on the whole thing about the pap smears, about why that minimizes the advocate's argument. Because in essence, if Planned Parenthood, that's one of the main things that they do that they provide that is a health benefit, if it's becoming less and less significant that we provide that health benefit as frequently, then the inference would be that the impact of Planned Parenthood's actions would be less and less. And I think that's the way you want to present that argument. All right, thank you.